Welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jane Irrigation Training Series. I'm your host, Richard Rastuccia, and today we're going to be talking about what you should be looking for as you start to make an evaluation of what ag tech products to purchase. Now, this includes irrigation, but it's not confined to just irrigation. And the reason we're doing this is we find that oftentimes if you're not thinking fully through what you're trying to accomplish, you sometimes get burned or buy the wrong product that doesn't fit your needs. And nobody has the time or the money to make that mistake. So we're going to try to provide you with the proper questions, the things to investigate before you invest in ag technology so that you're a better consumer. And so helping us along this journey is Jeff Tuel. Now, those of you who know Jeff, you know he's the executive vice president of Jane Distribution Holdings. He's the thought leader for all our Jane monitoring and control ag technology products and irrigation. Jeff's been around this industry for a long time. Jeff and I served on the Irrigation Association Board of Directors together about 10 years ago now, Jeff. That seemed like a long time ago, but we were there. He's got a passion for technology, and he works with growers on a day-to-day basis in the Central Valley on technology. So he's one of the few people in the industry that really gets the insight to what's happening in the field and what's happening in technology being applied to agriculture. We're really fortunate to have him with us today. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And as always, thank you for the kind introduction. It's truly is a passion for me, and I really enjoy, what I'm doing professionally and the team we've built and the technology that Jane has, and just the industry as a whole, just watching this industry grow and expand.
Yeah, well, that's really cool, Jeff, and it shows your passion definitely shows in your work. That's for sure. Now, Jeff, first question I want to ask you, this is one that comes up a lot for me is, are growers adopting technology these days?
It's if you asked me that question a few years ago, I would have said, not as fast as we'd like. And, there just seemed to be a lot of pent up demand, pent up frustration. People were thinking about it. Very few were moving. Today, I'm really happy to report that, we're seeing the market move, and we're seeing large growers, small growers. I think everyone is really knows that they should be in the technology game. They know that technology is the way of the future and can help them achieve some of the goals and benefits that they're looking for. And so I'm super excited to see, the current movement that's happening. Really positive, really positive.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. My guest Wednesday was a gentleman that talked about self-driving or autonomous lawnmowers. And I mean, he was talking about, residential landscapers buying 85 of these and dropping them off to their jobs so that they're being mowed every day. And then one guy managing 3 mowers on big commercial jobs. And this technology is really happening. It's really starting. So here you have a guy with an autonomous lawnmower, a smart controller managing irrigation. It's especially with labor issues, it is making everybody a little bit more productive and where they need to be.
Yeah, no doubt. It gives me hope. I mean, if we can do autonomous lawnmowers, people would have tossed that out the window. As we think about and talk about, autonomous irrigation, on the ag side, I think a lot of people feel, this is a pipe dream or something so far off into the future. But when you think about autonomous lawn mowing and large equipment that's moving through the fields now, we're just around the corner from autonomous irrigation.
Yeah, very much feels like we're on a tipping point right now. Absolutely. And things are going to happen very quickly. So definitely. Yeah, so what we need is some help on how do we pick the right technology? What do we ask? What do we do? And that's what we need you to do. Help us with today.
All right. So, I probably should have said, instead of know what to look for before you buy, I should have said know what questions to ask. But, given the scarcity of water and the increasing water regulations and with inflation, the increasing cost of labor and inputs, using ag technology to help mitigate these is at the top of mind for many growers. We just mentioned, the growth we're seeing right now. And if you couple that with the proliferation of new ag technology and companies that are trying to sell the latest, greatest solutions, it can be pretty darn confusing and for some even intimidating. As you mentioned, I've been in and around the agriculture and technology industry for quite a while, and I feel like I have a pretty good handle on what works and what doesn't, and what to look for in terms of technology and who best to buy from. And I want to share that today, somewhat generically. It's probably will be the least Jane presentation or webinar I've ever done, so I might hear about it from Eric later. But I just really feel like I want to give growers some strategies to help with their decision-making process. And I'll caveat it to say, the answer to all these questions from the Gene side is, yeah, we can do it. So I'll get that in before we get going. Let's see. All right, I'm going to start with a quote, and I love this quote from Yogi Berra. Sorry if you guys can hear the train coming by.
Yeah.
It's the 12 o'clock. It's running just a couple minutes late here.
The 12:07 is right.
Yeah, exactly. What Yogi said here was, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. And it's funny, but it's a profound way of saying, if you don't have a plan to get to where you want to be, you won't make it there. I mean, it's so true with so many things that we do, but it's very applicable to deciding on what ag tech to buy and who to buy it from. So I just wanted to start things off with that. And sorry. This slide I've shown in a previous webinar, and I wanted to show it again here today, just to kind of get everyone on the same page in terms of what ag tech actually is. So ag tech is the use of technology in the form of hardware and or software to improve agriculture production, efficiency, profitability, and sustainability. And for me, at the most fundamental level, if the technology you're considering does not accomplish these results, these basic results, then keep looking. Go to the next supplier. This is really what ag technology is about. You can see, from this slide, we've had a bunch of the different things that are there as far as artificial intelligence, imagery, integrated farming, smart machinery. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. But really, if it's not going to help you be more efficient or more profitable and more sustainable, then keep looking.
Boy, and that's so true, Jeff, because I think about it. And of course, when I think of ag tech, I immediately think of irrigation, but there's so much more out there. And in fact, I bet people think other things first before they think of irrigation. And this is a pretty comprehensive slide. I really appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, this thing keeps wanting to double jump on me. Today we'll go through these 4 simple steps. I mean, it's really about making a plan, pick a champion, pick the technology, then validate the data. And I'm really confident that if you follow these tried and true steps, you will end up with the right technology, the right supplier, and ultimately the results you're really looking for. So, let's look into the details. The first step is to make a plan. I mean, think about and list out everything you want to accomplish using ag tech. I say here to also think about how to achieve them, but frankly, the how should come from the technology suppliers, but it's always good to think about, how am I going to get to where I want to go? The Yogi Berra statement. The key here is to think about things like, what do you want to monitor in the field, at the filter station, on the pump? Do you want to be able to control various elements of your irrigation system? So this is kind of the whys, and I think as part of that first step in building your plan, you want to answer some or all of these questions. These 4 elements will help guide your thought process in establishing your goals. For sure, you want the technology to help assure that you are irrigating to your crop's needs and not over or under irrigating. That's kind of like the ante and the minimum level that you want to get to. Do you want support for your nutrient management plan, maybe through some form of automated fertigation? Given all the new regulations on water consumption, water use, you should definitely make monitoring and recording your water use a primary goal. As I've said before, if you do not have your own data, you will be subject to whatever your water district or SGA data says, and that's not a place that you want to be. Now, personally, I feel it's essential to monitor and record your irrigation events to verify how long irrigation ran. I say this because it might be the number one false sense of security that growers experience, and we see it all the time. If you are manually starting and stopping irrigation events, opening valves, turning on pumps, etc., then I promise you this is not happening as precisely as you think. And when we put monitoring on, we see this all the time. We have a lot of systems out there that have monitoring but do not have control. And by monitoring this, so things are still being manually done, we see it all the time as far as the run times that are there. So by monitoring that, it allows you to know exactly how long and how much water was applied. So let's think about some other goals.
Yeah, I just want to say about that, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's so important, right? Because we do, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. We all know that term.
Yes.
And then it's so inexpensive to have this today. I know even for my residential meter, I've got a device I put on there. It took me 5 minutes to install. And I use an app on my phone. If I flush the toilet, I say I use 1.5 gallons of water. And it's instantaneous. This data is so easy to get now. Everybody should be looking at it.
Absolutely. Totally agree. So when you're thinking about other goals, definitely consider looking beyond just water. A lot of what we talk about and focus on as water. Is in-field weather important? It should be. Think about during spray applications, tracking rain, temperature, humidity, more accurate ET, and these parameters also feed into disease monitoring algorithms. So in-field weather is important. What about satellite data and imagery? Right. It watches your entire field on a weekly basis and sees things that our human eyes simply cannot see, and it looks at the whole entire field. There's no way a person or even people could go through the field and see what satellite imagery is seeing. So it's something you should ask about and look for in the technology that you're considering. Do you want to maximize labor savings? If so, you should consider various forms of automation like pump control, valve control. Be broad and thorough on establishing your goals. You can always pare back later or plan to expand later as your budget allows. The key here is to communicate all of these things to prospective technology suppliers and make sure that they can provide exactly what you want. You also want to make sure you're not being sold and paying for a bunch of things that you do not want or need. Many suppliers will try to tell you you don't need this or that, and it's usually because they can't supply it. So just don't get unsold on your primary goals. These are your goals. This is what you want to accomplish on your ranch. These are the benefits, the savings, et cetera, that you're looking for. And there are suppliers out there, obviously Jane being one, that can deliver what you're looking for.
Yeah, great points, Jeff. Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody that we do have the Q&A and the chat open. So if you've got some questions that you want to ask Jeff or make some comments, put them in there and I will ask them when it's appropriate. And also we've been given some great Jane gear, hats, t-shirts and stuff for great questions. So feel free to put them in there.
Yeah, fire away. Okay, so now that you have the goals well defined in your plan, it's time to ask the next set of questions. One caution here is to not get too caught up on the hardware Yes, it's important, but the software, or what we might call the user interface, is what you'll be using every single day to make decisions. Be sure to get a full demonstration. Ask a lot of questions on the software. See if you can get a demo version to play with on your own. I mean, there's nothing better. Most companies should be able to give you, a demo version of the software that you can log into and try it. Take it for a test drive. See if it's easy to use, if it's easy to understand, if the interface itself is fairly intuitive, or is it very complex? Do you have to dig down many layers? What does that user interface feel like to you? Does it give you actionable information, not just a bunch of data that you have to dig through and interpret yourself? So really important questions. Dig into the software. On the field service side, that's huge. It's probably the number one complaint we hear, and I think an area where Jane shines the best. Ask hard questions about this, because it's not a matter of if the equipment is going to need service, or you're going to need help or service on the software side. It's just a matter of how it's going to be handled. If someone tells you their equipment doesn't need servicing, look for another supplier. It just, I mean, we hear this sometimes, like, oh, we only have one service guy covering the whole valley, and because our stuff doesn't really need service. Yeah, I can't see that. I talk to those growers that are frustrated about that. Ask how many service people they have. Are those service people dedicated to this equipment only, or are they doing a bunch of other things? How big is the area that they cover? What's the average time to repair? These are all important questions. They're hard questions. A lot of suppliers won't want you to ask some of these questions, or they might beat around the bush on them. Get answers to these questions. Another important consideration here: how long has the supplier and manufacturer been around? Is it a startup? Is this company in it for the long haul? I thought about this, and like, you probably wouldn't buy a tractor from a new company that doesn't have a proven track record. So don't do it with your technology either. Find a sound company that's been in business, that has the backing, and is going to be here for the next, for the foreseeable future, for the life of the technology, for the time that you're going to be on that ranch. And does the provider offer other services? Is this all that they do? And I say this because we hear complaints and frustration all the time about suppliers that provide other services that take time away, and oftentimes those other services may be higher priority than your technology. Do they know the technology themselves, or do they have to refer to the manufacturer? I promise you, you will get frustrated, and problem solving will be prolonged more than necessary if the supplier can't fully support the technology themselves. And again, these are these are things we've heard in talking to growers, where they've been bantered between the say a supplier and a manufacturer, or perhaps there's manufacturers that partner. So they have to marry two technologies together, and then these two get into this finger pointing, and who gets left holding the bag is the grower. They're frustrated. Oh, it's his fault. No, it's his fault, and super frustrated.
Yeah, really a great point, Jeff, because you want to, a lot of the stuff, it's a significant investment of time and money. And if the provider just goes away, you're going to be stuck.
Yeah.
Yep. We got a great question.
We've heard that story, and I've heard others, in the industry make these presentations where they say, the yards of growers is littered with, the bones of old technology startups that have gone by the way. And we hate to see that, but it's something you should seriously consider when you're looking at new technology.
Yeah. So we got a question from one of our viewers, Jeff,
Yeah.
and it's about the rate of adoption for technology. And So we had said earlier it's faster this year than it was last year. And they kind of want to know, well, how much faster is it happening this year versus last year? A little bit, a lot, a ridiculously amount higher?
Yeah, I wish it was ridiculously higher, but I would say I would say it's a good the market is up a good 30-40%, which is significant. In years past we might be sitting flat, or we might be sitting at 5 or 10, 15%. So I would say we're seeing adoption accelerate at this point. Good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's really good insight that you're one of the few people who actually has that.
Yeah. So now that we have a solid plan, the next step is you need to pick a champion within your organization. A lot of people miss this step. This could be you as the owner. It could be a key foreman that you have, a ranch manager, or someone else that you really trust that has the capability. They really need to have a desire to learn. They need to be passionate about technology. Implementing technology newly into a growing operation is not it's not easy, and you have to garner that internal support. It's from a champion perspective. The champion is really who takes the leadership role through the implementation and ongoing day-to-day operations of the system. It would be best to have them involved in the planning process as well. Not not totally necessary, but regardless of when you bring them in, they must be fully trained on all aspects of the technology, and they really need to have a comprehensive view. They need to have a good working understanding of the irrigation and pumping systems on the ranch. They should also be capable of learning basic field service, as this will save money in the long run. And if they're not great at service, or you don't want to take on that service responsibility, then they need to, at a minimum, be the point of contact for the provider. We do run into that where we're trying to chase a repair, or we're trying to chase something, and we don't have that champion. We don't have that point of contact, and what that ends up, it takes the repair longer, and sometimes there's frustration there. So we really do strive with all of our customers to get a good point of contact and a champion. One of the key attributes of a champion is they have to be a great communicator. They have to be good at teaching others on the ranch. You're adopting something, you're asking people in your business, in your farming operation, to change the way they're doing things. And so this champion needs to be a great team leader, a good communicator, a good teacher.
Well, this is so true, Jeff. I think the champion role is so critical, because oftentimes the champion turns out to be the owner or the president.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always work, right? Because then it seems kind of biased.
Yeah.
When it comes from somebody on the team, boy, they seem to get the perspective of everybody else really well.
So true. I mean, we have had instances where an owner will be really passionate about technology. These dollars are coming out of their pocket, and so they will be that champion on the front end of it. But then what happens is the owner gets pulled off on other important things, right? They've got a lot to contend with, a lot of competing priorities. And if they don't identify a champion that's going to pick up the ball from where they really were pushing in the early stages, then we'll see sometimes the technology will start dropping off, the use of the technology. And then you see the owner have to jump back in, get on everybody. And again, we would recommend you need somebody to champion this. So it's just a great way to look at that. Let's see. All right. So here we're talking about some of the additional important things that champion needs to do, or make sure gets done. Sometimes they can't do it all, but they need to make sure it at least gets done. all AgTech software requires some amount of field and crop related information. These are things like crop type, irrigation type, application rates, KC curve, selection, planting dates, blossom or bud break dates. There's a fair amount of information that helps define the fields themselves, the irrigation system, the crop on the field, etc. We see this information passed over all the time. I think everybody has good intentions of going back later to fill in the needed information, but it rarely happens. And, the key element here is that the quality and accuracy of the results from your new system will be directly dependent on that information being correct and completed. The champion should also set and manage soil moisture thresholds, which are really, it's the upper and lower limits of where you want your soil moisture to be for optimal growing conditions. They should set up alerts for things like moisture levels outside of the bounds that you just set, overpressure, under pressure, overflow, high flow, low flow alerts, temperature for frost alerts, excessive wind, for during spray applications. And, the champion would also generate your irrigation schedules or be able to train your irrigators to effectively do it. Again, I can't emphasize enough the primary communicator of why the new system is important and the results you're after. This champion has got to fill that role. Buy-in and getting everyone on the ranch involved in achieving your goals is critical. We've seen many instances where a grower spends tens of thousands of dollars on ag technology, and we'll visit, the field later only to find, let's say, that it's nearly flooded because the irrigator is irrigating exactly the way he or she always have. And in this case, they're not on board and they haven't bought in. And it's up to that champion to really, bring the workers on the ranch in line with that and help them to understand the benefits and what those goals are. All right, so we have our plan, and now we have our champion. Let's get into picking the right technology. So if you've done a decent job so far, picking the right technology will be much easier, as you'll really simply want to match the hardware and software to your plan, and that's why it's key to build that plan before you start talking to possible suppliers. Matching sensors to your crop. What do I mean here? What I really mean is you don't need a 48-inch soil moisture probe in your tomatoes, or a 24-inch probe wouldn't really help in your pistachios. Those are two good examples. This is where you don't want to let anyone unsell you on what is right for your crop and in your field. You want to listen to what people are saying, but if the rooting depth, then make sure you get a soil moisture probe that matches that depth. And there are other examples that we could go through here, but the next thing I would say is what are the communication needs? There's really only two options here. Everyone needs some form. I say everyone, all of the manufacturers need some form of cellular to get the information up to the cloud and then back down to their software that's on your computer, tablet, or phone. The second communication form is radio, which is typically a 900 megahertz radio. Some suppliers only have cellular. Some offer both. Jane is one of the companies that we do offer both. You might ask, why is radio important? Well, radio communication can be important where cell coverage is poor. So if you have this situation, you want to make sure that the technology that you're looking at can support it. So what about power requirements?
We've got a question coming in about that cellular communication or that communication. Is there a way to test it before you actually buy?
Absolutely. I mean, the simplest test is if you can't get cellular service on your phone out in the field, that's a good bare bones test. But most companies should be able to bring a unit out to that site, to that prospective site, you know, power it up and determine whether or not it can connect. I mean, with us with our C3s, we're actually able to look at, the signal strength. There's probably 3 or 4 different measurements as far as signal strength. And oh gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like RSSR, and there's a bunch of things that we look at to determine whether or not the communications are going to be stable and viable. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's great to be able to test it before, because we certainly know the cell phone providers are making changes right now to the systems, and we've seen some challenges from that. So testing it out
Absolutely.
ahead of time is really important.
Absolutely. Great. Great comment. Great question. So what about power? What are the requirements for power? Does it have solar or batteries that will have to be replaced, or maybe it has both? I would say, my engineering side says if you have solar, then you have batteries. It's a different kind of battery. It's a longer life. It's a lithium ion or some type of lithium based battery. You're not going to have to change it very often. If it doesn't have solar, then you will be replacing batteries more frequently. It's something you have to be aware of. There are a number of systems out there that just use little D cell batteries, and those are prone to failure, and they can work fine. So it's just one of those things you have to decide: is that something you want to have to worry about changing? The only other alternative is permanent power. So having a source that you can plug into. This is typically only viable at the pump and filter station. If you had to put permanent power out in the field, it would be so cost prohibitive, to run power anywhere remotely in the field. I think most everyone in the market has this figured out fairly well. You really just want to be sure how the devices are being powered and what the maintenance will be on that. The next bullet is important if you plan to expand your system down the road. The keys here are to understand any limitations on expansion. And again, some suppliers will want to talk about this, some won't. This could be at a single device where the number of ports, or what I would say inputs outputs, is limited. Let's say for example, you're monitoring soil moisture and line pressure in the field. But you want to add valve control or maybe below canopy temperature and humidity later. Can the device support these additions without having to change it out or install another device? Secondly, what if you want to start with a part of your ranch? You have large operations, so you're going to do 20 field devices to start with, and then you want to expand across your entire operations over the next few years. Let's say that's going to require a total of 100 devices. We have several growers that have 100 devices out there. Can the hardware support it? Can the communication support it? Can the software support it in a way that's easy for your users? These are all important, questions to ask. And you keep hearing me ask these questions. I want to encourage everyone to challenge any of the suppliers that you're talking to. The last bullet is very similar to what I just said about expansion. A few key questions here are: can the firmware, which some people may say, what's firmware? Firmware is the software that drives the hardware. It's what's embedded on the hardware device. Can that be upgraded remotely? In other words, can the supplier or manufacturer push software updates, or do they have to go to the site every time? And if they have to go to the site every time, it takes longer. It's typically more costly. The updates can't happen as frequently, or certainly not as easy. The same question would be true is how is the user interface, the software that you're using, how are the upgrades handled for that? Can they push those upgrades? How often does the company provide upgrades? Great question. Do they charge for upgrades? Or are they included in, the fees? Again, these are all important questions, to ask.
Well, they are, and we're seeing with this, certain upgrades happening right now. This is more and more important every day.
Absolutely. So I won't spend much time here, but it's important to know that much of the technology works together to give the real results you're looking for. Two simple but important examples are, if you're going to monitor soil moisture, then you should also make sure the system has accurate ETC, and I'll say preferably satellite based, for the simple reason that ETC tells you how much water is needed to be replenished, and we've had a number of webinars on this. And the soil moisture shows you how much water is in the soil and how the water moves through the soil. So it gives you a good idea of frequency and duration. GeneLogic's soil moisture infiltration chart is really a great example and one of the most popular applications within our software, and I will say within the industry. And so if you have not seen that, go back and look at some of the the webinars that we've done in the past on this. On the last bullet here, you should not open and close valves without monitoring downstream pressure as a form of verification that the valve actually opened and closed. I would call this a best practice. There are some growers and some companies out there that do it. We have growers that ask us to do it, and we will. But we always recommend as a best practice that you're looking at that downstream pressure so you can see that the valve has opened and closed.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, that'll be a big money saver at some point.
Absolutely. So kind of on the home stretch here, the last step is, after the system has been installed, you should spend a fair amount of time validating the data. And this will really build your and your team's trust in the new system. It's critically important. We've seen instances where there's a lack of use of the technology because there's a lack of trust in the data. It happens all the time. Take time to verify. There's really no substitute for digging holes or augering to verify soil moisture. Probably the number one thing that gets questioned. If something doesn't seem right or make sense, investigate it. Call your supplier, call the support to help verify it. They should be more than willing to support you in the field, or maybe remotely, to eliminate any questions or concerns you have on data validity. This would be a great question to ask up front. Let's say I don't believe the soil moisture, or I don't believe this data. What would you do to help me resolve that? And then lastly, I think because it is different, if the data is different than it's expected, and we see this all the time, don't assume it's wrong. We see this all the time on soil moisture as an example. It's a good one to talk about. We auger it down, we go out and we show the grower. The most common, I would say, you'll see they'll irrigate, a grower will irrigate, and it won't look like the soil moisture changed. And I can tell you almost every time it's because the soil is already so wet that the additional water isn't perceivable, right? So soil moisture probes, they look at a change in soil moisture. And, we've literally gone out and dug holes, augered, and, show the grower there's water standing in this hole. You're not seeing this change. But I'm not complaining about that. That's part of our job is helping that grower build trust in that data, so they know that they can rely on what they're looking at there.
Yeah, I love that point, Jeff, because oftentimes I do it too.
Yeah,
I'm right and the data's wrong, right? There's something, because I can't be wrong,
right.
But usually it is the other way.
Yeah, no, it's not always, but I will say a vast majority of the time, that's kind of the way it is. So I just have a few more slides. These are more just to show some pictures of, I'll say, some good practices, some bad practices, things, to look for. I would encourage, anyone that's considering ag technology, ask for references, talk to other growers that are using this technology, ask around, ask if you can go visit a site. We just recently took a large grower to visit a customer site. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, if you do things the right way, then you should be proud to show off, what you're doing. These are some examples here. You can see how poorly this the conduit on the ground there is. It's broken up. This is probably more related to maintenance, but it also would have to do with, installation. Some of these pictures show wires all over the place. You've got exposed wires. You've got wires that are spliced together with just electrical tape. And, we had one recently, like that. And, it's just not the right way of doing things. You can see the one on the pole there at the bottom where you've got wire nuts and you got exposed, wire. It'd probably work until it rains or, something, the wind starts blowing and that's gonna, come off. I have so many of these pictures, it's not even funny. So in this case, I'm showing an example. I don't know if everybody can see my mouse here, but so I'm showing an example here. This is a pressure transducer. The wire is laying in the dirt. You can see it just, laying here on the ground. This is sideways, so it's horizontal with the parallel to the dirt itself. So the problem with that is that dirt is going to flow in here. It's going to accumulate in here, and it's going to change the results that you get out of that pressure transducer. This is how it should be done. So I have two examples, here of how it should be done. Here we've spliced into the drip line, and it is vertically oriented. So any dirt or debris that's in here is going to pass by when you flush, etc. You're going to get a more true reading, less maintenance. All of the cabling is strapped neatly to the pole here. Same thing on this one. This one, they actually went up a little further, gave themselves a little bit more of a buffer, for that. So those are good examples of clean installations, the kind of installations you should be looking for. If you're not seeing this from the supplier you're considering, again, I would say keep looking. Here's an example, another one. I'm not sure why there's two poles here, a little wonky. They're tied together up top. So some things to look for. Everybody say, oh, what's so bad about this one? Okay, so solar panel is below the canopy. How well is that going to charge when you're in full leaf on these trees? You're not. This is going to probably struggle some to charge. Another thing is, okay, we got a lot of stuff on the ground here, not ideal. This is the soil moisture probe. I don't know if everybody can see that. Sticking way up out of the ground. It's going to get broken, and you're not getting the full value of that soil moisture probe. This image shows you how a soil moisture probe should be buried. It should be flush with the ground. And you can see here, everything is in conduit. All of that is wire tied, very neatly to the drip line itself, and then to the pole as that's going up. You can see the pressure here that's going up in. So, I mean, just a different, again, this is what you should look for. Solar panel, high enough to be above canopy. Cellular antenna, high enough to ensure good reception above canopy. Sometimes you need that, sometimes you don't. I think most of the time we try to err on the side of mounting these as high as we can. I have Toro here, but I'm not going to blame Toro. Toro didn't install this. I don't know who installed this. Somebody sent me this picture, and it was just, to me, a great example of what not to do. This is a spaghetti bowl. I would imagine showing up on this site and trying to troubleshoot. I love I'm an electrical engineer. I love troubleshooting things. And the first thing I would have to do is sort these wires. I would have to literally wring them out, figure out, trace everything and figure out what's going to where. You know, this is a box that we put together. Bill Freeman, one of our application engineers, put together for a custom application. And you can see the approach we try to take. Everything is neat. Wires are routed. We've got labels on here. If you have to troubleshoot this, it's going to be, much more quick and easy. It's going to perform better. And it's the type of system that you want to have.
Yeah, really a clean installation there on the right.
Yeah. This one, last slide here is just to show, one of our sister companies, IDC here, that did a really nice installation. This is a combination of Jane Logic, C3s here. There's 3 C3s, there's Twig, there's 2 different Twig systems. There's a lot going on. It's a very complex system from a pumping and valve control, a number of other things that are being controlled here. And I thought it was a good example of how it should be done. It's everything is tied down. They're run cleanly. You can see how the wires are there. The conduit is used. It just was a nice, clean installation. So I just wanted to kind of finish up with a really good example of a complex automation system that shows that's how you do it right there.
Yeah, always nice to have an example of how it's done right, and that's a beautiful installation there.
Absolutely, that's the kind of stuff you should be looking for. That's all I have. I mean, this is a subject we could go on and on and on about. It definitely brings out the passion from my side. I get to see, our team gets to see the best of both worlds. I mean, I couldn't say what percentage of the time, but I mean, it's a reasonable percentage of the time that we're replacing different technology because it either didn't work, didn't deliver, wasn't supported, the company's no longer around, for a number of reasons. And so we get to hear some of these battle stories that growers, go through. My hopes are with some of these questions and some of the things to think about that the growers will gain an understanding and some strategies to not be in those shoes, not be in the situation where they've spent this money. Now it's a year or 2, 3 down the road, and they're looking to have to do this all over again because they had a failed implementation or the support just wasn't there for it. So I hope this helps.
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. One of the things you said at the beginning was I'm going to help provide you with some questions to ask, and your presentation was full of those. We're all better equipped today now after watching this to go out and buy some technology, and especially as the adaptation accelerates at the rate we're seeing, this is become more and more important. So we did have one last question, Jeff, that just came in, and that is, do you determine system distribution uniformity before selling Jane Logic?
So we do distribution uniformity tests before we sell water management, Jane Water Management consulting services. And this is the service where we install our own equipment. We own the equipment. We manage it. We maintain it, service it, etc. And we are providing optimized irrigation schedules on a weekly basis to the growers themselves as a service. It's on a dollar per acre basis. So in that instance, we feel it's necessary to do a distribution uniformity test before we offer that service. But in general, if we're selling a Jane Logic system into a grower, we wouldn't do a DU test unless they requested it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great, Jeff. Well, listen, thanks so much for providing us with this information and the questions to ask. We're going to be better equipped. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. We know your days are really busy this time of year, and we appreciate you spending some extra time with us. Also, please remember you can see all our training videos at janesusa.com/trainings or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Again, really appreciate it. We'll be back next week on Wednesday. We're going to talk about the advantages of using vinyl tubing in indoor growing situations, whether it's a controlled environment ag, greenhouse, or indoor growing of cannabis. So that'll be a good one. Anyway, thanks again, Jeff. Thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Yep. You too.